So finally, embargoes have lifted on the ASUS Zenbook S16 with that new AMD chip. And that's probably why you're watching this video. You want to know about the performance of the new chip. How much better is it? So do I. So I'll be going into a bit of depth and taking a look at some gaming benchmarks. So it is the Ryzen AI now, the 9HX 370. It does promise a lot because it's gone from 8 cores to 12 cores now, 24 threads. 5.1 gigahertz maximum turbos. But the graphics, this is integrated graphics that is the top spec version now. So it's the Radeon 890M, and that's gone from 12 cores to 16 cores with the graphics. And that means the performance should be a lot better, right? And it's also got a higher turbo at 2.9 gigahertz versus the old 2.7, and paired up with some fast RAM. We've got 1 terabyte SSD of storage, Windows 11 Home, 78 watt hour battery, super nice build to it. It's only 1.5 kilos. I'll be going over it in detail so you know all what is to know about the new Zenbook S16 and the new chipset from AMD. So they have this Sur Aluminum or Sur Aluminium to it. Now it's a combination between ceramic and alloy, and it looks fantastic. Does it pick up fingerprints? Well, a few little areas here. It's supposed to also be very resistant to water, very robust, and great to have on the top of it. And I love these lines that they did put on there with the Zenbook. Now you can easily open this lid up with just one hand. That is not a problem at all, as you can see there. And what about the weight of it? So 1.5 kilos is our weight, and I'm going to measure that here just very quickly with my scales, just to confirm that. And I can see that, yes. But what about the total travel weight? Add now the power supply. That's what you get in the box, is our little power supply there. And it's very small, 65 watts. The weight of it now is 1.729 kilos. So that's a very good weight for a 16-inch laptop. You can see in this light just how that Sur Aluminum does look. It's got a very nice feel to it. It's like a matte, almost like a paper kind of feel to the top of it. Really do like it. Very little flex now when I press down on the lid. So look at this touchpad. It is just huge. The gestures on it, it does support ones down the side here. So you do have, if you use this, you've got a brightness control, which is on the right hand. You've got volume, and you get used to that. Using that is also gestures at the top. And there's a lot of things you can customize with the software, but this touchpad is now 40% larger. I really do like it, and I don't feel the need to plug in a mouse. Definitely not with this huge, massive, usable area we get, and a very nice smooth finish to it. It is a great touchpad. One of those gestures that I just forgot to is video playback at the top. You can use that, and it's good. It's handy because it's so large. They've made just extra features, gestures from that touchpad. Now the keyboard, 1.1 millimeters of travel. It is a little bit shallower than what I'm used to. Typically you see 1.4, 1.5, but it is not bad. When you're typing on this keyboard and using it, there is a very small amount of flex there. That's me pushing down ridiculously hard. So when you're typing normally, you're not going to notice any flex or bounce with that. You do probably see that I have a layout that's completely different from your typical ANSI English or ISO English US style layout. This is the Spanish keyboard. So we have that accented in there, and there's a few other little things that are different. Power button is right here. It does have a little bit more resistance to the print screen button and the delete that we have next to it. I haven't hit it by mistake. I do kind of wish it was separated away. And notice that we have this area either side. There's a bit of a gap there. So they decided not to go with a number keyboard with this, which may be a problem for some people. It's made out of alloy and very nice build quality. So the whole thing is full metal built with this, and it's CNC machined. The keyboard is backlit. We do have 3 different backlit levels. So you've got a very bright one that it's on at the moment, and you can dim it right down. And note the little holes at the top. These are CNC machined. Now there is exactly 3,052 of those little holes there on the top. And it's not just for aesthetics. It does look really nice, but this is also to help dissipate heat. And that is some passive cooling it has there at the top. When you look at the Zenbook S16 side on, you can see just how thin it is with that 1.1 centimeters. So on the right, we get a USB Type A 3.2 Gen 2 and a full-size SD card reader. Unfortunately, it's not ultra high speed, this one. Now, I did test out that SD card slot. You can see that when you put the cards in, they don't go right in and click in. Not that style, unfortunately, so they stick out about half of the card. Transfer speed's okay, around 90 to 100 megabytes per second. So it's not the super fast, quick ones that can do like 300 megabytes per second. On the left, HDMI 2.0, two USB 4.0 ports. So these do support 40 gigabits per second, power delivery with those. Video out, you can run 3 displays, and you have a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack with mic support. Along the back, there is this strip you can see here. Now, this is for our wireless antennas, and it does have Wi-Fi 7 on board. Now, to gain access to the internals is not difficult. There's just all these T5 Torx screws you need to remove. There are 2 different sizes, and there's no hidden Torx screw under the rubber feet like some brands do that you need to lift this up, and it's a bit of a pain, but not here. So I would rate it as being about an 8 out of 10, and just being nice and easy to get into it. Now, the first thing you'll notice is on the back here, they've got these dust filters. They're super fine. So that means the dust will just sit on the other end here, and you'll be able to wipe that off with a microfiber cloth. So it's quite clever of them to do that. It's going to stop the dust getting into those fans as much. Maybe eventually a little bit might, but it shouldn't really be an issue. 78 watt hour battery. Now, typically with light use, 30% brightness, I am seeing 8 to 9 hours out of the 78 watt hour battery, which is good. Demanding work like editing a video in the performance mode, not the full speed, but performance, around 4 to 5 hours. Speakers here on the side with some large chambers there. That's why it does have a bit of bass to it. We've got a vapor chamber here, the 2 coolers, and this is our PCIe 4.0 SSD. So sadly, no room for another SSD slot, which is quite disappointing. Would have liked to have seen that. It means we could throw in another drive, easily upgrade. So you'd have to take this drive out and then put a 2 terabyte, 4 or 8 terabyte PCIe 4 SSD in that to really get an upgrade. Very good layout to things though. I do like the CNC machining here, how everything fits in very snug. There's an internal frame here screwed into place, and that is keeping everything secure in place. Well screwed in, well laid out, everything, very good build quality. RAM is right here, you can see some of it. And there we have our Wi-Fi card. So no upgradability really, just the SSD. That's it with this laptop. Being so thin and light, it's sadly normal for them. So did the Zenbook get a great screen or just an average screen? Well, it is very good. There's so many things about it I really do like, which I'll cover now. But one of the complaints from me is that it's a glass screen, so very glossy. Yet they didn't give it touch support. I was really baffled by this when I was at Computex in Taipei with ASUS, and yeah, no touch support with a glass screen seems a bit odd. Now, I don't know their reasoning behind this. Maybe it was cost. Maybe they just didn't want to fit in a touch digitizer to this panel, and that's just the way it is, unfortunately. But the color gamut coverage of this panel, which, by the way, is a 3K screen, it's 2880 by 1800 the resolution, 16 by 10 aspect ratio, and 16 inches. So P3 was 100% color gamut there, the coverage. 97% of Adobe RGB, fantastic. NTSC, no surprises at 95%. And sRGB, 100% coverage of that. It's a really good screen, up to 120 Hertz. And it is to Rhineland iCare certified. And it does have 500 True Blacks from Visa, that's certified too as well. And 550 nits is the maximum brightness, but for some reason, I measure with power plugged in only 352 nits, which is fine. It's a very nice looking panel. I just wish it was closer to their claim. I don't know why I'm not getting the 550 nits. Webcam sample of the Zenbook S16, so it is a full HD webcam. It does also have another camera that is infrared for Windows Hello, so you can just log in when it scans and sees your face, which is very handy to have. Now, microphones do sound good. You've got a lot of AI features, so you can have it in a directional mode, 360 mode with the mics. You can also blur the background and do all those other things too as well that you get with Windows and some of the AI features. Windows Copilot, of course, is there. I haven't really gone over that in detail in this video because I've covered it many times before. So I like the webcam quality. I think it is good. Going to be great for conference calls, and good audio quality too with the Zenbook S16. Alright, so here we are now in Windows 11. It's Windows 11 Home that it comes with, not Pro from ASUS. And you'll see here that the speed of the RAM, so 7500 megahertz it's listed as, and mega transfers. It's very quick, and that's going to aid our integrated graphics, the Radeon 890M that I talked about there in the intro. So finally, a complete, new chipset, new architecture, everything, a bit of an upgrade. RDNA 3.5. So it's gone from 12 cores to 16 now, and it turbos at 2.9 up from 2.7. So quite a bit faster there. Under the device manager, there are a few little interesting things I wanted to show you here. So you'll see that the network adapter, this one's from MediaTek, so Wi-Fi 7. That's great to have on board. So future-proofing this laptop, although probably no one at the time of me publishing this video actually has Wi-Fi 7. I don't even have it myself yet because I still find them just a little bit too expensive to justify me getting it. The disk drive, this is a, well, you can see there. No, that one's my external drive here, but this is, I don't know who makes that. I'm not going to read out all of that model name, but speeds are okay. It is PCIe 4.0. The reads are a little bit faster than PCIe 3.0, but the writes are pretty much max that. So not an impressive SSD. Now there is room to add another one. You could upgrade this and put in a faster drive. I don't know why a lot of these brands don't put in slightly quicker drives, and 1 terabyte of storage is fine, but I think especially 2024 that really should be 2 terabytes. So we do have Windows Hello for our login with the cameras. So you got their full HD camera and the infrared camera there. And you will see the processor here listed 24 times because it's 24 threads, 12 cores, however. So this is the change. They've gone from 8 to 12, and it's still the same 5.1 gigahertz turbo if you compare that to their previous generation of chipsets there. So if you wanted to change our dedicated memory to the integrated graphics, you have to go not through the ASUS software, my ASUS, but this. And that is to bring up the AMD settings for Radeon graphics. You want to go to the Performance tab, and I'll show you this because I think it's a very interesting setting that a lot of people probably want to tweak and experiment with. And here we have our variable graphics memory. Now, I've kept this on the default, which is minimum. But you can go along here and put it to high or custom. This is probably what most people would do. And you can set this from being just half a gigabyte all the way up to 24, which is kind of crazy for integrated graphics. My recommendation, if you game a lot or you do a lot of 3D work, probably put this one on 8. 4 to 8 is a good kind of area there. Now that will increase the average of your 1 percentile lows if you do dedicate a bit more. But I'm going to leave it as is. I'm not going to make any changes here. All the benchmarks I have run are out of the box settings here. That's how I test things with my particular process here. But let's take a look at that graphics performance jump up that we're getting. So time spy here, remember that this is running 28 watts only. So the chip is a lot more efficient, but it is a bit, I feel it's limited. It's definitely power limited. It could do a lot better at 45 watts or 54 especially, but they have it set to 28 watts here. Even in the performance mode, it doesn't seem to want to go over that. So the time spy score now is a bit of a bump. Typically with the 780M, I would normally see 2,800 for the graphics scores. You can see we've gone up there about 600 points. That's a welcome boost. Now, I have seen higher with Arc Graphics with the Ultra 9 185H, scores of about 4,000. We're getting there now. The CPU score could be a bit higher again. I think it's the power limit. There's a bit of a battle going on, a bit of a struggle between the graphics, the Radeon, and those 12 cores for power, especially when they're both being taxed at the same time. But still good score there. Now you see with Geekbench, this is where we get a big improvement. Now I would see normally around 2,200 for single core score with the 7840HS or say the 8845HS. The older chipsets with the 8 cores, still the same 5.1 turbo, would perform quite a bit less here. So there's a big jump up in the single core score. Now multi-core, depending on what wattage you did run on those previous chips from AMD, could get a similar score here. But again, it's at 28 watts limiting it here. I believe it can do a lot more, this particular chip, and I'd love to see this in mini PCs or in gaming laptops where it can really just stretch its legs. So I did a bit of a comparison here compared to my older an HP laptop that I do have, and you'll see that this is the 7840HS running at 45 watts, and here is our new chip. running at only 28 watts, but it still is 14% faster single core score and 16 multi-core score. So that is impressive. This is a big leap up. And just factor in that power limit, how this is using less power, but performing a lot better. So that is impressive. I think this is the kind of leap that we did need, and I can't wait to see this chipset in gaming handhelds and a lot of other tech out there. And there's a little bit of information on what I was testing out before in previous chips. You can see that the Hawk Point and what was it before? Now we're Strix Point. I'm getting confused now, but there isn't really much of a change. The Ryzen 8000 series is the same as the 7000 really, and that's why I use that as a comparison, even though that's the 7000 series. They're really the same. 8000 series are really, really similar, but massive boost in performance. So a welcome change there. Really good to see. Another benchmark to show you is our Cinebench R23, and the single core score, impressive. That is really good, nearing 2000 points. That's a big leap compared to the previous generation, as I was talking about with Geekbench. The multi-core score there of 15,000 just over is good, but that's not a huge leap here. Again, I know I've said it probably about 5 times. It's the power limits that's kind of holding it back a little bit. So we'd love to see this chip running at 35 watts, 45 at least. Later on, I should with the Art. I believe the Pro Art 16 that I will also be getting will be running a higher power limit because it's a bit of a thicker laptop. It's got the dedicated graphics in it too. So 4K video editing is possible, and I have some files here that are 4K 100 megabit per second with my Sony a6400 that I recorded quite a few years back. And playback and just the timeline and everything for simple, basic 4K editing, nothing crazy with grading and transitions and whatnot, is very, very good. It's really smooth, as you can see, as I jump ahead with the timeline. I don't notice any drop frames. And it seems to me that Adobe have finally given us the support we need for integrated graphics and any kind of Radeon GPU too, as a matter of fact, because it seems to work just so much better. And you'll see it using the GPU. So editing 4K on these laptops, you don't need a dedicated graphics card. I've noticed this with the Arc graphics, with Intel, and also now AMD. So this is a great change here. Export time, so I'm going to use the YouTube preset, and we'll take a look at this because it's so much faster than what it used to be because of the hardware, but because also the support we now have from Adobe adding the GPU and using the GPU and not just basically being CPU only encoding. It's now using both. This is 1 minute of footage at the YouTube preset, and look at how crazy quick this is, and see that it's using 80% of our GPU, integrated GPU, and about 28%, 30% of the CPU. So this is why it's steaming ahead. This is great to see this update and how much better the performance is. So this should take around under 30 seconds, and once that disappears, it's done. Okay, so there we go. Factor in my delay, 29 seconds. That's fantastic. VP9 decoding. This is using Chrome, and I'm playing back a YouTube video, and you can see here with the stats enabled that it's fantastic. I've been playing it now for almost 2 minutes, 0 drop frames. This is something that I don't normally see. There'd always be a few, but it's dropped absolutely nothing. So AMD's done a really good job with this. The drivers too. Decoding this VP9 4K video, streaming it, flawless. So this is great, exactly what we want to see. All right, so onto gaming. I think this is what most people are going to be interested in the most, of course, because now we have the upgraded GPU. So the Radeon 890M with its 16 cores now and 2.9 gigahertz maximum turbo. So this is Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I want to run some in-game benchmarks first, and the reasoning behind this is that you can run this on your own system to see what kind of performance you get, because it's a fixed benchmark. It makes sense. So I haven't got any of the fluid motion frames enabled. There's no super resolution. So none of those little tricks to boost the performance. I've got all of that disabled. So this is the raw performance we're going to look at. So 1080p high preset, 43 average frames per second. That is very good for integrated graphics. Now, I ran this exact same test with my MateBook X Pro from Huawei, and that has the Ultra 9 185H from Intel in it, their last or latest chipset here, and that got 32 frames per second average. So we get 11 frames per second average more with the Radeon 890M. And I tested it out on the 7080M. So this is the previous generation of integrated graphics from AMD, and it has the 12 cores, but this chipset in this laptop runs at 45 watts. We got an average of 40 frames per second, which is very good. So pretty incredible that the chip, the new one running at 28 watts, can still beat out the previous generation running at 45. That's a big difference. But that is why I say that it's the power limit. It's definitely holding up that Radeon 890M. Assassin's Creed Valhalla. This is with the high preset at 1080p. And we have an average of 38 frames per second. I was expecting better out of this. It is in fact worse than the previous gen, and probably because of that limited power limit. In the 7080M last gen, it managed 39 average frames per second with a minimum of 12. And note that, yes, I do have half the dedicated RAM, so that is another factor there, but I can't increase it with this laptop. So Cyberpunk running at 1080p at the low preset here with frame generation on. We're getting 90 frames per second, and even just with a bit of a battle here with someone, that the overall frame rate, playability, and the frame time, not bad at all considering this is integrated graphics. So I'm in a bit of trouble here up against these police officers. But yeah, that's playable. Okay, dips down to 43 frames per second occasionally as I move about. You can see that's when the frame generation there, the AMD fluid motion frames, or whatever they call it, struggles to keep up with things. But it's playable. It's good. And really good frame rate considering its integrated graphics. This is impressive with this game. Okay, so what about thermals then? It was just running that 28 watt power limit, and it did reach 94.1 degrees maximum. And all the time I have been using the full speed mode. So if you hold function and then you tap F, you've got performance mode, standard mode, whisper mode, and then full speed mode. Now in whisper mode, it is super quiet. It does restrict the performance. Most of the time it's very quiet. It's just benchmarks or gaming exporting video. You do hear the fan. Now above the keyboard, I have noticed it get up to, and with my thermal imaging camera, I did capture 49 degrees Celsius. So it gets hot, a little bit toasty just above the keyboard there. And fan noise, well, I'll give you a sample at worst case scenario, running a benchmark. And this is when you do hear the fans, but it's not that loud. It's not actually bad at all. I'm impressed with the fans on the Zenbook S16. I know I did say I wouldn't show the BIOS, but here it is. You've got a little bit of basic information right there, permissions and whatnot, firmware updates you can do from here too. Although I don't recommend it, just do it from the ASUS app. You can go into the advanced settings, and this is where you can find things like your boot order or to disable secure boot under security. Advanced, you can only tweak this, which is the UMA frame buffer size. So you have up to 8 gigabytes here through the BIOS, but if you use the AMD Adrenaline settings, go through that, then you can set higher amounts. Now, if you did want to run Linux, you are going to run into a few driver problems because this chipset is so new, and especially the MediaTek wireless card, Wi-Fi 7, it doesn't recognize it at all. This is Linux Manjaro with the latest update, and I use the open source drivers too, but it's just far too new for that. So you can see right there, so there is no network connectivity, nothing, and Bluetooth, it's not going to pick that up either. But the touchpad is working. Sound does seem to be working, so we do have audio, so some things will work. The issue is going to be drivers for that Wi-Fi 7 card for Linux. Okay, so first up, the laptop. Let me talk about that. So build quality, excellent. I love that Sur Aluminium top on there with the mix that they've managed to come up with. Ceramic and alloy feels great. A really high quality finish to it. And the rest of it, the all alloy build, the CNC machine body, the holes at the top. Touchpad, 40% larger than the previous model. Very good to use. The gestures are great. Keyboard with the 1.1 millimeter of travel now may seem too shallow on paper. I was a bit worried about that, but having used it, it is very nice the way those keys just bounce and spring back once you press them. It's not a noisy keyboard either. I really love the feel of it, what they've done with it. It's an excellent keyboard. And then ports, okay, we have a decent selection. SD card readers about 90 to 100 megabytes per second transfers. It's not the fastest out there, which is a little bit of a shame. I would have liked to have seen perhaps a dedicated charging port and not having to give up the Type-C port for the charger, but the charger is very small, 65 watts, a decent output to it. Battery life from the 78 watt hour battery, very good, around 8 hours of light use, and then demanding work around 4 to 5, like editing video. So it's okay, it's not phenomenal, but it should make it through a full day for most people. Webcam quality, microphone, speakers, all check out. But what don't I like about it? The screen, it's glass, but why is it not touch? I feel that's a missed opportunity. It really should have touch support with it. I think it would have been good. And the brightness, I get 352 nits, but it's supposed to be able to do 550. For some reason, I'm not able to measure that with my Spider X Pro. So, yeah, I don't know why that is, the reason behind that. The other is upgradability. So there's no spare SSD slot. There's, of course, no upgradability with the RAM. I did expect this being soldered on, but it caps out at 32 gigabytes, no 64 gigabyte option that I know of. And then the wireless chip, Wi-Fi 7, can't upgrade it, can't swap it out. And Linux drivers, for now, because it's a new chip and then the new chipset, are going to be a bit of an issue until that's incorporated into the drivers of the latest distros and whatnot. I did test out Linux Manjaro, the latest one, but it didn't seem to cater for it just yet. Okay, onto that chipset. So the Ryzen AI 370, oh, the HX is in there as well. Sorry, it's such a mouthful. Ryzen 9 HX 370. There we go. I'm finally getting that. So up the core count. We now have much better graphics. Well, in theory, because it's RDNA 3.5. So 4 more cores. Clock's 200 megahertz higher in the boost, but what is restricting it so far in this configuration in a thin and light laptop is it's configured to 28 watts LTDP. It can't stretch its legs, especially the GPU. It can't turbo as high as it could and maintain and give us better frames per second I'm seeing now. Now it is a bump up in performance as I've seen, especially with some of the games that I tested out and showed you. Very good, like The Witcher 3, excellent. And then when you look at the wattage running 28 watts, but having that kind of power, it really puts Intel to shame, because Intel will be running, say, 55 watts to achieve similar Geekbench scores, Geekbench 6, with their Ultra 9 185H. And then the art graphics was not very good at Assassin's Creed Valhalla. But when I tested Assassin's Creed Valhalla against the 780M, the previous generation, you saw that was actually performing better low frames per second too as well, which was odd, but bear in mind that was running at 45 watts. This is 28 watts. And then when you look at the previous gen on just the CPU side of things, not comparing the graphics, it is up 14% in my testing, single core, and then 16% multi-core score. So that is a really good bump up in performance. It's a huge increase there, and that is great to see there. So that is the full story of the Zenbook S16, a long review I know, but I wanted to cover some things in a bit more detail, and I hope to get hold of this chipset, but in a beefier, thicker laptop that can push hopefully 45 watts or maybe 54 watts to see what that RDNA 3.5 can really do when it's got a lot more headroom for power and not being restricted as it is in this laptop a little bit, especially when it comes to that gaming. So I hope to see you in the ProArt 16 review. Bye for now.